Good afternoon and welcome to Northwestern Pritzker School of Law. Thank you all so much for joining us today as we celebrate the life and legacy of one of our most distinguished alums, the Honorable Joel M. Flaum, JD class of 1963, LLM class of 1964. I'd like to extend a special welcome to members of the Flaum family in attendance today, his wife Delilah Flaum, his son and fellow Northwestern Pritzker Law alum, John Flaum, grandsons Eli and Jackson Flaum, and a very special thank you to Judge Flaum's daughter and longtime member of our faculty, my colleague, Allie Flaum, as well as her husband, Paul Schulman. I'd also like to recognize today's speakers at this event, the Honorable Diane Sykes, Stephen Miller, Gary Feinman, Peter Friedman. And we'd like to extend some special gratitude to two of Judge Flaum's longtime colleagues, Judges Amy St. Eve and Michael Scudder, who have played an instrumental role in pulling this event together today. Judge Joel Flaum was a dedicated member of our community and has maintained amazing relations with the university and the law school since his time here. He served as an active member of the law board from 1998 to 2007, becoming an honorary member of that board in 2002. He was the keynote speaker at Northwestern Pritzker Law's convocation in 2006, was a member of our Council of Judges, and served as a moot court judge for our students. We went back into the files, and it looks like Judge Flaum has hired more than 40 Northwestern law graduates to serve as law clerks. Yes, we got a special applause for that. And also for years in the fall and spring would host students from our judicial practicum courses. Throughout his distinguished career, Judge Flaum dedicated himself to public service. After graduating from Northwestern, he practiced at a Chicago law firm before entering his career in public service as an assistant state's attorney for Cook County in 1965. He later became first assistant Illinois Attorney General and was first assistant U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois before being appointed to the bench. He was first appointed as a judge on the United States District Court for the Northern District of Illinois, appointed in 1974, then elevated to the Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit in 1983, serving as its chief judge from 2000 to 2006. Just weeks before Judge Flaum's death, he received maybe the highest honor in the federal judiciary, the Edward J. Devitt Distinguished Service Award for Justice at the Supreme Court of the United States. A true honor and capstone to his amazing career. At the reception for that event, Awards Committee Chair, Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett said that Judge Flaum has given more than half of his life to the judiciary. He has served the justice system with a grace and collegiality that has earned him the unanimous respect and admiration of his colleagues, and he is altogether deserving of the highest honor bestowed upon an Article III federal judge. I could not say it better myself. We are tremendously grateful for Judge Flaum's incredible contributions to society, to the legal profession, and to our law school. He is deeply missed. I would now like to introduce Judge Flaum's daughter, Allison R. Flaum, Clinical Professor of Law and Legal Director of the Children and Family Justice Center. Allie joined Northwestern in 2005 and has taught in both the Center on Wrongful Convictions and the Children and Family Justice Center. Before coming to Northwestern, she was a trial attorney at the Washington, D.C. Public Defender Service, a Prettyman Clinical Fellow at Georgetown University Law Juvenile and Criminal Justice Clinics, and a Skadden Fellow at the Urban Justice Center in New York City. Her areas of expertise include criminal and juvenile defense, post-conviction litigation, and trial advocacy. Please join me in welcoming Allie Flaum.
Thank you, Zach. Good afternoon, everybody. I know that Dean Clopton just told you this, but I will tell you again that my name is Allie Flaum, and I am Joel Flaum's daughter. I share that with you, even though all of you know this already, because as I said at my father's funeral, I start every day with that as my North Star. First, I want to say on behalf of my family how much we appreciate my father's Northwestern family taking the time to create this special event today. I also want to thank Judge St. Eve and Judge Scudder and Dean Clopton and everyone in the Alumni Relations Office, especially the amazing Christine Breeke, who worked incredibly hard to make this day happen. I also want to thank today's speakers, who are also members of our family, very much so. And I want to thank Gary Feinman and Beth Cole for their extremely generous contribution in support of today's event. My father was sworn in as a judge not once, but twice. Those two ceremonies took place almost 20 years apart, and while they differed in a lot of respects, he closed both of them with a quote that inspired, and I would also say defined him. Everything, all of it, belongs to the people. That is what he said in 1975, that is what he said in 1983, and that is what he believed and what he lived every day of his professional life. And because my father believed that the people's power is only lent to our public officials, he committed himself to exercising that power with the greatest care. To his dying day, he saw himself as both a student and a servant of the law. He saw himself as a steward. Now, my father was no radical. If you know, you know. But in the short time since his passing, the Overton window has shifted so significantly that the principles that guided his public service, humility, civility, good faith, these values can seem these days rather unusual. I find that it is easy to feel unmoored as we take in all that is happening around us. It is easy to feel that choosing to look for common ground, choosing to hold fast to our mutual humanity has fallen out of fashion. But I do not think that my father would agree with that, because he also believed that every day in our classrooms, in our courtrooms, in our city, in our country, there are people, many people, doing their best to live by the same principles, the same North Star that guided him. Now, my father was also no fool. The man who prosecuted Richard Speck knew well the harm that we are capable of doing to one another. But he was at the same time the man who disclosed Brady material in the trial of Richard Speck, which is to say, he was a man who understood that the right thing to do is the right thing to do. And that once you see that, nothing and no one can relieve you of what that knowledge requires. I like to think that my father was exceptional in this way and in others, but I do not think he would agree with that either. In fact, when Judge St. Eve and Judge Scudder first conceived of this event, he was still alive. And let me tell you, it was very hard for him to get comfortable with us making any kind of fuss. Why? Because everything, all of it, belongs to the people. But while that philosophy was self-evident to my father, it was and it is by no means self-activating, which is to say it is hard and necessary work. So while I thank all of you for honoring him today, I also want you to know that whenever you wield the power that has been bestowed on you with humility, you honor him. Whenever you look for what connects us rather than what divides us, you honor him. Whenever you strive to understand before you judge, you honor him. Whenever you reject cruelty, whenever you hold the line for the rule of law, whenever you refuse to perpetuate or ignore or legitimize unfairness, you honor him. If my father were here today, and in a way, I feel like he is, he would tell us not to be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. He would tell us to act justly now. He would tell us to love mercy now. He would tell us to walk humbly now. He would tell us that while we are not obligated to complete the work, neither are we free to abandon it. And he would tell us that we ought to try to do that work together. It's my honor now to introduce you to our first speaker, the Honorable Diane Sykes of the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals.
She is her father's daughter. Hard to follow. And speaker of the truth. I'm honored this afternoon to participate in this celebration of the life and legacy of Circuit Judge Joel Flaum, a distinguished graduate of this law school, an exceptional federal judge, a lifelong public servant, and a dear friend. I was blessed to be Joel's colleague on the Seventh Circuit for more than 20 years, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to share a few words about his influence on our court, on our law, on the federal judiciary, and on all of us who were fortunate enough to serve with him. Joel was the chief judge of this circuit when I arrived at the court in 2004 from the Wisconsin state court system, and of course he gave me a warm welcome, as all chief judges do with a new colleague. It did not take long, however, before I experienced the rewards of watching and learning from him and began to reap the fruits of his bountiful friendship. I think I speak for all of my colleagues on the court and throughout the circuit in saying that there was no one in this legal community who was more respected, admired, and beloved than Judge Flaum. His 50-year tenure on the federal bench reflects the depth of his servant's heart, his commitment to our constitutional system, and his dedication to the highest and best traditions of the federal judiciary. Throughout his remarkable 5 decades of service, Judge Flaum devoted himself to strengthening the administration of justice and the legal culture in our circuit and in the national judiciary as well. He set the gold standard for the judicial branch, both in the excellence and statesmanship of his decisions, and by the way in which he infused every dimension of his work with his special personal graces, his wisdom, his consummate commitment to fairness, his generosity of spirit, and his uncanny ability to understand others, to persuade, and to build consensus. Let me start with his extraordinary intelligence and exquisite judgment. The breadth and depth of Judge Flaum's intellectual contributions to the law can be found in his published appellate opinions, numbering more than 2,000. He wrote opinions on a vast array of subjects, and each one exemplifies his unique talent for getting to the core of the dispute and understanding the human conditions that contributed to it. Each one is learned, thoughtful, and articulate. His opinions for the court did not simply decide the case. He also wrote them to teach about the law and the role of the judiciary in our system of government. Each one reflects his commitment to preserving the rule of law and respect for the dignity of everyone before the court. And there is another important quality to a Judge Flaum opinion. He always explained the court's reasoning in such a calm and manifestly fair-minded way that he promoted public understanding and acceptance of the court's judgment, and he cultivated greater public trust in the judiciary. But Judge Flaum's opinions are not the only measure of the exceptional nature of his contributions to the administration of justice. He cared deeply about the federal judiciary as an institution, and this commitment found expression and bore fruit in many ways. Perhaps most visible were his leadership roles within the judicial branch. These include, most notably, his 6 years as chief judge of our circuit, and in connection with that position, his service as a member of the Judicial Conference of the United States. For part of that time, he also served on the conference's executive committee, where he dealt with a wide array of administrative and policy challenges, ranging from judicial security to information technology to budgeting to the judiciary's relationships with the other branches of government. More recently, Judge Flaum served for 6 years on the Judicial Conduct and Disability Committee, which is responsible for addressing some of the most sensitive issues in the branch. To all these leadership positions, he brought his impeccable judgment, his exceptional tact, and his steadfast commitment to preserving the independence of the judiciary and public confidence in the judicial system. Less visible were Judge Flaum's many contributions to strengthening our legal community and culture, especially his many roles, both formal and informal, in educating, supporting, mentoring, and inspiring those of us who serve on the bench and in the legal profession. His love of teaching is well known here at Northwestern. I know others will speak to that today. His role as a teacher of the law here at this law school and in his daily work with scores of law clerks was immensely important to him. More informally, but no less importantly, Judge Flaum was a much admired role model for the bench and bar in our circuit, especially here in Chicago. He was enormously generous with his time and sage advice for countless judges and lawyers who sought his guidance and support. So much so that the district judges in the Dirksen courthouse took to calling him the court's consigliere. But none of these terms, judicial statesman, mentor, court consigliere, quite captures the significance of Judge Flaum's lifetime of work as an unwavering force for good in our legal community. He was the guardian of collegiality on our court, a model of courtesy in the courtroom, and a champion of civility in the legal profession. Every day, through his quiet example, Joel promoted these indispensable virtues. That so many judges and lawyers relied on him for advice and support is a testament to the character and quality of his leadership, to his generosity and willingness to share his time and his abundant knowledge, experience, and wisdom for the greater good of our judicial system. On and off the bench, in his opinions and through his more intangible work in the judicial vineyard, Judge Flaum strengthened the rule of law and immeasurably enriched the judiciary as an institution. His example and friendship profoundly influenced so many of us who were blessed to work with him in the long arc of his career. We miss him terribly, but his legal and human legacies will endure. I thank Northwestern for this opportunity to remember my dear friend and colleague, and will now yield the podium to Stephen Miller, a partner at Cozen O'Connor Law Firm and Judge Flaum's former law clerk. Thank you.
I loved Joel Flaum. He was one of my absolute favorite people on the planet. And I feel like we had instant chemistry from the very first time we met. It was a clerkship interview in the mid-90s. And I feel like every time after that, it was as if we were always meant to know each other. We shared lots of laughs together. We enjoyed lots of political discussions, sports, family talk. And I mean, we were law clerks, so there was some law mixed in too. But really, I'll tell you what I remember now all these years later is really the daily kibitzing. Not about the law, but where we would hear from the judge's stories what it meant to him to be a lawyer, and specifically a lawyer as a public servant, specifically a lawyer in this town, the height of ethics. Kibitzing would start around, you'd work a hard day and the kibitzing would start around 5 o'clock Eastern time. We'd hear about the amazing things he had done, his perspectives, his insights, the people he knew, Chicago history that we would have had no way of knowing, American history, everything. Now, it was not just a one-way street. The judge had new clerks every year, and I'd like to think, he was curious about us. I know that for me, he was very excited to learn what it was like growing up in Kentucky. And I know that that gave him a lot of joy, so that every day he could ask me how I was adapting to wearing shoes and dating outside my family. And the answer was always the same. One thing at a time, Judge. Baby steps. I kept hoping he would tell me that he felt the same thing that I felt, that this was the best it had ever been, that I was his favorite. At first, I tried to be subtle. I would say something coy, like, Judge, your favorite clerk is going out to get something for lunch. Can I bring you something? Nothing. Eventually, I got a little pushier. Judge, we're almost done here. You're going to have to figure out a way to tell me that I'm your favorite clerk. And he would just wave me off. Well, finally, we get to the last day. I've packed up all my stuff, and I walk into his chambers. If you remember the room, it's a big room with a table on the right, couches on the left, desk way back. He was sitting at the table. So I came in to say goodbye, knowing that I'd always see him. But I said, Judge, this is it. This is your last chance to tell me I'm the favorite. This time he didn't say no. He got up and he started walking over to me. And he wrapped me up in the hardest bear hug I had ever experienced. And I start freaking out because, oh my God, it's happening. It's happening right now. He's going to do it. He's going to say it. And he lets me go. He puts his hand on my neck. We're looking at each other. I can see his soul and he can see mine. And he says, Miller, because we know that when he called you by your last name, it meant he loved you. He was like a football coach. He said, Miller, it's not you. Stop asking. I tell you that humbling story for two reasons. First, if I am not the favorite, then it must mean that one of you other clerks is the favorite. Well, mazel tov, nerd. But more importantly, it's Judge Flaum's particular gift that there's probably 100 people out there that can credibly think that they were his favorite. He loved all of us, and we loved him. Mentor doesn't really do it justice, what I'm trying to convey. It's really something more akin to role model. And even more colloquially, I just knew I wanted to be like that. He was smart, funny, wise, kind, and he had done amazing, impactful things, starting as a young lawyer. Imagine our position as young lawyers, and we're hearing stories about what another person, roughly in our stage of life, was doing. They were spearheading major corruption investigations. They were trying long, difficult cases. They were basically running the U.S. Attorney's Office while still finishing high school. He was the youngest person ever appointed to be a federal judge. He was a star. And he loved being a judge. He loved it in two ways. There's the outside part, the public-facing part. But from my vantage point, I think he liked the inside part even better. He was the glue of the court. He knew that his role, steward, was to find common ground with everybody. He could find something to talk about with everybody and develop a bond and a strong foundation so that when there were the inevitable disagreements over a case or a parking spot, whatever it was not going to turn the court. It wasn't going to upset the strong foundation that he worked so hard to build. He liked the cases for sure. I don't mean to minimize that, but the public-facing part of being a judge, you can think of it maybe as the presiding and the deciding. He certainly liked and was comfortable with the deciding part, but I really admired the presiding part. He had a real sense of community and wanting to make sure that as lawyers came into his court and into our court here in Chicago, that they knew they were a part of a community that carries with it some responsibilities for civility, but mainly he was the force welcoming them into that community. If he had hard questions at an oral argument, he would ask it with a smile. Didn't have to be disagreeable. He wanted you to feel comfortable and welcome so that we could get the best outcome. Sometimes when a young lawyer would come into court and through context clues, you could figure out that their relatives were in the audience. I saw the judge sometimes after he adjourned court come down off the bench and ask the young lawyer to introduce her parents. Little things like that. When we were in chambers and we were editing, he said something that sticks with me still, where he says that the opinion should be written for the losing party. They don't need snark. They don't need your jokes. They just need to know that they got a fair shot. And that was the way he conducted the public-facing business. He loved this country. He wasn't first generation, but his love for the United States was like that of a new immigrant. While he was a young judge, the youngest judge, he had actually aged out of one important requirement, which was eligibility for the Naval Reserves. That didn't stop him. He got an exemption, and while serving as a federal judge, became a member of the Naval Reserves, which he then carried on for years after that because of his commitment to this country. He knew how lucky all of us were to have the freedoms that we have. He loved his friends, all of those people that he would describe to us, the people he did those cool things with when he was our age. They would keep coming back. They were now pillars of the Chicago legal community, but they would still come back for him because he was that guy to them too. He loved his wife. Delilah, you know, I hope, but he talked about you not just with affection, but with admiration. And that was something that every clerk that ever worked for him understood. He talked about you like a true partner. And just like every other lesson he handed down to us, that was one more thing that we wanted to aspire to because we knew that was what you should do. He loved his family. He would call his mom every day before leaving. That's how you know he was about to leave, is because he was on the phone with her. We could have 10 things we needed to get from him, but once he was on the phone, it was over. We lost him. There were photos, John, of you and Allie all over chambers. And invariably in all the storytelling we would do, he would do. We would hear about things from your life. So much so, Allie, that you know you and I were in the same city after the clerkship, and we would get together occasionally, and somehow it would come up, some story from your childhood, and I would have to rudely say, no, I've heard that before. 4 times I've heard it. But I think everything came together for him when he became a grandfather. It was, from my vantage point, his greatest joy. You could see something different. And as with everything, it's just one more way that we want to be like him. Judge Flaum, if you didn't know him well, he must sound like a fictional character. Nobody could be that great. But he was. He really was. And because he was so great, all the law clerks ever wanted to do was to make him proud. We will miss him forever, but we will never stop trying to make him proud. Thank you for allowing me to honor him today, and I want to introduce you to Gary Feinman. He overcame a mediocre resume to clerk for the judge and became one of the judge's most well-accomplished clerks. He was a partner at a large law firm. He was the state solicitor general of Illinois, and eventually he himself became a district court judge. And now he's back full circle. He missed the litigation. He's back at Latham & Watkins here in Chicago, helping private clients. But Gary certainly knows well the lessons and wisdom of Judge Flaum, and I'd like you to hear from him next.
Thank you, Stephen. That was lovely. Dean Clopton, Flaum family, judges, honored guests. Judge Flaum loved this place. He loved Northwestern law passionately. And it's a privilege to be here with you today to share some memories of that great and uniquely good man. I had the privilege of sharing some memories a few months ago at the Dirksen building, and with your indulgence, I'll draw upon those remarks today. So I first met Judge Flaum in late 1989 when I interviewed with him for a clerkship, and other than a couple of Lake County traffic court judges I had met in their professional capacities years earlier, the only other judges I had encountered in my life were a handful that I had applied to and interviewed with in the prior weeks. So I arrived with fairly settled expectations of what I would encounter with the interview with Judge Flaum, a relatively formal affair in which the judge's assistant would escort me to an ornate conference room where the judge would probe and test me in the arcana of jurisprudence, after which I would spend time with the judge's clerks, who would remain very guarded about the year they were having with their judge, and guarded about the job that they were doing. And that's, as you all know, that's not at all how things went. I was greeted warmly by Judge Flaum's assistants, Janie and Sharon. Judge Flaum came out of the conference room. I wasn't brought in to see him. He came out of the conference room, gave me a warm hello and a firm handshake, took me through the conference room into his study. And what struck me was that aside from all the Lincoln memorabilia and the World War I posters, the surfaces and bookshelves and walls were occupied with photos of his family, as Stephen mentioned, most prominently, John and Allie, and also of friends and colleagues. And we didn't talk about the law at all, at least to my memory, during the interview. Instead, he asked me about me, where I was raised, whether I was a Cub fan or a Sox fan, what I like to do in my spare time, and my family. And he shared with me a bit about himself, growing up in Hudson, New York, attending Union College, and of course, Northwestern Law School, being a public servant, and of course, his family. There was something instantly familiar and instantly familial about Judge Flaum. After 45 minutes, it's as if we had known each other for our entire lives. And I don't think, hearing from Steve and talking with clerks over the years, my experience was hardly unique in that respect. So when Judge Flaum called me a couple weeks later to offer me a job, I accepted without hesitation. I thought I had hit the jackpot, and I did hit the jackpot, because his decision to hire me was a blessing that altered the course of my life, both personal and professional. And on the professional side, I don't just mean the lines on the resume, although being a Flaum clerk, as Steve mentioned, being a Flaum clerk in Chicago is a very, very good thing to do and to be, because of what Stephen said, is you want to make him proud. And if you make him proud, you're acting in the way that a member of the community, a member of the law community, whether you're on the bench or whether you're a member of the bar, ought to act. And he taught me how to live greatly in the law and in life. And what I mean by that was, he was always, as Steve mentioned, a model of judicial temperament, integrity, wisdom, civility, restraint. He always made time for me, giving me his full attention, like I was the only person in the room and the only person that mattered, offering sound guidance and counsel in matters large and small, personal and professional. He always cut to the heart of the matter, and he taught me how to focus on the things that mattered, how to be the best lawyer and colleague and friend and mentor, but more importantly, son and spouse and sibling and father that I could be. He made me and Beth feel like family. And of course, he did the same for countless others and he did so for me at various critical junctures in our lives. And throughout my career, whether I was practicing law or serving as a district judge, I always strive to live up to the example that he set. And I've fallen short more times than I care to admit. And whenever I did, I knew it. And I felt that I had let him down. But he was always my North Star. Whenever I face a difficult situation, I think to myself, what would Judge do? And then I try and do it. And whatever success I've enjoyed, whatever good I've done, it's due in large part to his steadfast presence in my life. So when in 2009, I interviewed with Senator Durbin in the hopes of becoming a district judge, he asked me who my hero was. And I asked for permission to name three, and Senator Durbin said, okay. And I said, Abraham Lincoln, Steve Feinman, who's my father, and Judge Flaum. And I instantly and mentally started patting myself on the back, because I had named 3 Illinoisans in that pop quiz. And then I silently gasped. And I said, Senator Durbin, I realized that 2 of the 3 people I named are Republicans. And Senator Durbin replied, that's okay, Gary. Those 2 are more than okay in my book. And if there was one thing that Judge Flaum and I didn't see eye to eye on, it was politics. He, of course, never, ever, ever for a moment let politics affect his jurisprudence, but he did love, as clerks and colleagues know, he did love talking about it and arguing about it. And we had some pretty intense discussions over the years, which in retrospect are very quaint by contemporary standards. And I've been thinking about him a lot. I mean, I always thought about him a lot, but I've been thinking about him a lot over the past year. Like many people, I've become increasingly disoriented. And that's especially so in the last month. And above all else, and Allie alluded to this, Judge Flaum was an institutionalist, a small d Democrat, a patriot, a firm believer in the constitutional order, and a small r Republican, a believer in small r Republican modesty and virtue. And I mentioned in April over at the Dirksen building that I wished I could ask him for guidance on how to make sense of where we are right now. And that wish has not abated since. What I do know is that Judge Flaum would have offered insight and wisdom, and along with it, the comfort that all would somehow work itself out. I know as well that he would have immense pride in the courage and fortitude shown by the district and appeals court judges who at great risk to themselves are upholding the rule of law. As for the rest, it's something that I'll now have to figure out for myself. Over 35 years, Judge Flaum offered me the tools to do so, and I can only hope that I paid enough attention when he was doing that. The last time I saw Judge Flaum was at the Supreme Court, and the dean mentioned this. It was 3 weeks before he died. It was at the Devitt Award ceremony. The Chief Justice bestowed upon Judge Flaum the Devitt Award in a beautiful ceremony. In the courtroom, Justice Kennedy, Justice Barrett, and Judge Dow offered warm and moving tributes. And Judge Flaum, though struggling with pain and discomfort, stood at the lectern for several minutes and without notes accepted the honor, doing his best as was his wont, to say what the judiciary and the legal system meant to him, speaking movingly of his own history and upbringing, speaking lovingly of his family, and doing his level best to share the moment with everybody who was there with him. We then went to the Great Hall with its high ceilings and majestic columns and marble busts of Chief Justices past, and what was easily the longest banquet table I had ever seen. Judge Flaum was seated at the center. He was flanked by the Chief Justice and Justice Breyer. And that was a fitting tribute to a giant, the giant that Judge Flaum was and is of the law and our legal culture. But I know, and I know that we all know, is what mattered most to Judge Flaum in that moment was being surrounded by Delilah, John, Allie, Paul, the grandkids, and by colleagues past and present, and by dear friends. And that portrait is how I will remember him. And now I'd like to ask Peter Friedman up to the podium.
Hello, I'm Peter Friedman. I'm Judge Flaum's third favorite clerk after Gary and Stephen. I'm confident in that, and that's okay. I think what's actually remarkable when you listen to Judge Sykes and Judge Feinman and Stephen and Allie, you hear these incredible universal qualities of Judge Flaum, but they weren't cookie cutter. I think everybody experienced them in a very specific and tailored way to them, because that's the kind of person that he was. Thank you, Judge Sykes and Stephen and Dean Clopton, and especially to the Flaum family for letting me be part of today in Judge Flaum's life. With respect to my classmate, Judge Scudder, and the other judges here today, for me, there was only and ever will be one judge. I can't enter a courtroom and say, Judge or Your Honor, without my mind going to Judge Flaum and his singular legal excellence and expansive humanity. The Talmud says a judge must be wise, humble, God-fearing, and of good reputation. Check, 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 check for Judge Flaum. I loved clerking for him because he challenged me to think carefully, engage deeply, reconsider my priors when needed, but remain true to deeply held convictions. This was vividly highlighted for me early in my clerkship. An en banc death penalty case came to chambers. The briefs had orange stickers. I don't know if you remember that, Mike, when years ago when people actually had briefs. Death penalty cases had orange stickers. They were treated differently than every other. I was a strong death penalty abolitionist and told the judge I wasn't sure I wanted to play a part in that case, given the almost certain outcome. The judge told me that was fine and he would respect my choice, but that if I refused to engage on a legal issue within its existing parameters, who was I really helping? He asked, what were my convictions truly serving, other than my own sense of self, rather than the larger development of case law or the narrower issue of the case of the person whose sentence was before the court? Why wasn't the defendant, and really the whole system, entitled to my best effort and hard work? That's the epitome of what you want in a professor, mentor, and boss, all of which the judge was to me. The other speakers have talked about Judge Flaum's amazing legal and personal attributes, and I will get to them, but it would be really unfortunate if we overlooked the judge's sartorial style and attention to fashion detail. This was a man who matched his watch bands to his shoes and belts. He studiously picked out ties to go with his ever-present crisp white shirts, and there was never a hair out of place on his head. Judge Flaum was not amused by the idea of casual chambers or lawyers with checked shirts or unkempt hair. He definitely would have told me, Friedman, you need to shave. Apologies, Judge. But Judge Flaum wasn't always serious. I remember him laughing very hard when the clerks wanted to buy him an orange Pontiac GTO t-shirt that said, "The Judge," in psychedelic font. You need to go look at this on the internet. There's actually a picture of this t-shirt. The description doesn't do justice to how absurd the idea of Judge Flaum wearing this t-shirt would be. Like I said, he laughed. His eyes twinkled when we suggested it, but he made it exceptionally clear that the t-shirt would never, ever be part of his wardrobe. Others have spoken about Judge Flaum's kindness, his intellect, service, respect for others, desire for civility, and his love for his family. I want to note that these attributes were not separate from his extraordinary legal legacy, but they were essential to it. The fusion between the way Judge Flaum lived his life and was a lawyer and judge came from many things, but one of them was his faith. I think on today's email and program, the theme is justice, justice shall you pursue. That phrase comes from the Old Testament, the book of Deuteronomy. Why is the word justice repeated twice? One interpretation is that the word is repeated because justice matters not only as an end result, but doing justice as a process matters too. And the judge lived this with every fiber of his being. His outlook and actions in that respect were also encapsulated in another central Jewish tenet. And Stephen, you will correct my pronunciation if I get this wrong. I hope I've got it right. Derech Eretz precedes the Torah. And what that means is, of course, the Torah is the law, and it guides both Jewish faith and sets forth larger civil and criminal codes of conduct. So what could come before Torah, the law, the most central book in Judaism? What could be antecedent to this? Derech Eretz, which broadly understood means right conduct or the way of the land. Jewish tradition teaches Derech Eretz has 5 principal components. And tradition teaches that a person must follow them before they're able to study and truly understand Torah, because they are at the heart of everything in the Torah. Indeed, these principles had to exist in the world and be followed before Torah could come into the world. When I describe Derech Eretz, you will immediately see a picture of Judge Flaum. First, good manners, but not please and thank you. The good manners of being sensitive to others, civil, respectful, never embarrassing others, or never being sycophantic either, treating people as equals and in a respectful manner. This was Judge Flaum every day as a teacher, judge, employer, and human being. Ethical character, enough said. Respect for work and the value and dignity of earning a living. This was essential for Judge Flaum. A person's value was in the hard work they did. You could see this in the way he interacted with everybody in the courthouse building. Their title didn't matter. How much money they made didn't matter. What mattered is if they worked hard. Contributing to society beyond making money. Serving something larger than yourself. Judge Flaum served the people. He served the law. He served the military. He served Northwestern. He served as a mentor. And last, a significant component of Derech Eretz is building a family life. It is remarkable, given how much love, attention, and effort Judge Flaum gave to his family, that there was still so much left over to give to the rest of the world. It was his love and effort and caring were a renewable resource. Jewish tradition treats that living the way Judge Flaum lived is a prerequisite to truly studying, understanding, and developing the law, because the qualities of Derech Eretz give law meaning. Taken together, Derech Eretz led the judge to character, wisdom, justice, and compassion. These traits, not empty formalism, adherence to the latest academic fads, or fealty to personal whims about a fair outcome, were the bedrocks of his life and judicial legacy. They are reflected in, I think as Judge Sykes said, the 2,000 plus opinions that he wrote. Just like his legacy is reflected in the institutions he served, including Northwestern, and the people he loved and mentored, like his many, many clerks who loved him back with a dedication and devotion that I think, as Judge Feinman said, will last forever. May the judge's memory always be for a blessing, and if we truly honor Judge Flaum's memory, we will live the principles of Derech Eretz and ensure that justice will be done. Thank you, and now, Dean Clopton. I think we'll finish things.
Thank you so much, Peter, all our speakers, and all of you for being here today to honor the life and legacy of Judge Joel Flaum, a life and legacy that we'll continue to honor at this law school going forward. I'd like to welcome you all to join us in the atrium for a reception to continue these conversations and sharing of memories. Thank you so much for being here.